This video is about the future of the nuclear family. So it's pretty clear right now that the nuclear family is heading towards extinction, bar perhaps economic collapse, which may dictate a return for economic reasons. Although if you look at Russia with the high divorce rate, this is not necessarily a given. Now you can argue that the nuclear family is the best setup for society, and certainly it is the most economically efficient, more so than single-parent homes. And you could argue also that we're a pair bonding species and therefore it is natural. However, if it was natural, or what people, let alone women, wanted, then it wouldn't have disintegrated so easily. Yes, there has been government complicity towards breaking up the nuclear family. However, the demand had to be there, and women, and to be fair, also men, albeit 20% less in terms of divorce initiation, have taken up the option to abandon the nuclear family setup. The disintegration of the nuclear family was still a very voluntary act, and the stigma of divorce has now gone. Indeed, what we can conclude is that the demand was always there. However, certain coercion through the lines of, say, societal pressure kept them together. The reason for this demand is quite simple, really. Indeed, it's the same reason people move out of their parents' homes, and that is we experience a sort of cabin fever. People want independence and to be alone while still having some sort of companionship. It's a sort of contradiction. The Telegraph recently reported, and I'll link below, a study suggesting that happily married couples are increasingly living apart. Now, the study may not be representative of the whole nation of the UK, but it does reveal something quite obvious, and that is being married and sharing a home is not necessarily desirable, as people want freedom. Hence why we have the term man cave, for instance. Being married and sharing a home means that you are under complete surveillance. By this I mean there is nowhere you can go. For instance, if you step out of the house, you are being surveillance by other people. The home is the only place where you are not under surveillance, and when you are with other people, you are under surveillance from your girlfriend or wife. The problem with marriage is it is based on a false assumption of romantic love, a love which is almost inevitable to end, at least in terms of hormones. It will also end the relationship and thus end the marriage in trauma and divorce once this leaves. At the end of the day, marriage is for kids, and therefore, ultimately, marriage on the false idea of unconditional romantic love of your partner is, in my opinion, unhealthy and also immoral, considering the damage divorce does to your kids. Now, one of the criticisms of the MRA or Stardust / Barbarossa is that they promote degeneracy, i.e. more single fathers instead of advocating for a return to nuclear family. Now, the truth is the nuclear family needs reform. But let's look at the problem of single mothers and the traditionalist objection of them. Fatherhood is a social construct, and to be fair, so is single motherhood. However, motherhood trumps fatherhood for obvious reasons, and the devaluation of fatherhood is really just a reality of the weakness of fatherhood as a necessity. Sure, there are multiple studies that are coming out suggesting the importance of fathers. However, it begs the question of why these studies were needed in the first place. The objections to single motherhood can be traced to the anxiety amongst men, male identity, and that is rooted in the utility of men. Girl Rights Watch, for instance, did a recent video as a response to an article on men obsolete, which was interpreted by her as men having to justify their existence. The obsolescence of fatherhood, coupled with the rise of alternative reproductive technologies such as sperm banks, in fact I think they've developed a technology which makes sperm unnecessary altogether. has, however, rendered males somewhat obsolete and sometimes even just a nuisance. Now, I believe the damage that is done from single motherhood on boys stems from this anxiety. For instance, if my mother doesn't need a father, who will need me? This is amplified by the environment, such as if you do not have a father and yet the next door neighbor does. I didn't have a brother, for instance, and my cousins did, which made me feel like I was missing out on something. I believe this is comparable with fatherhood. Um, what do we mean by role model anyway? We are really referring to brainwashing. I say that not as derogatory, but as what it is. It's not socialization, it's brainwashing. Speaking of brainwashing, the media is quite what's the word I'm looking for? It's quite complicit in this male disposability. For instance, if you look at traditional nuclear families you see on television, you often find that the father is a bumbling idiot, and this is very deliberate. It shows that it basically says, yes, boys, you should aim to be a father. You should aim to be a workhorse for your family, but we're not going to give you any respect for it, and you can be divorced at any time. Although I think divorce is very rare in TV shows like Family Guy, Simpsons. I do remember one episode of The Simpsons where Milhouse's dad got divorced, and there was a scene where Homer started becoming just like showing anxiety, and this is very complicit. They are basically saying you should be this, but at the same time we're not going to give you any respect for it, and we're not going to give you any stability for it. Girls, on the other hand, do have a future, as they have a uterus and a sugar daddy government who will pay their way if she chooses not to have a husband. This may explain underage pregnancies, as they recognize this and internalize it, and indeed their identity is fixed on the fact that they do have a uterus. Either way, the child is clearly the property of the mother. The only thing the biological father can do really is to try to pretend that he is necessary and indoctrinate the child into being friends and compete with the mother's affection for the child's affection. This is nearly impossible, however, because the father works and therefore and cannot lactate either, and doesn't have the early years of a child's development. What is more is the male is now losing ground economically, mainly due to the horrendous government decisions, particularly dictated by feminist demands. The result is that women are choosing single motherhood as there aren't enough high-ranked males to leech off. Hypergamy. 53% of single mothers, for instance, are now by choice. So to conclude, the nuclear family is dying, and the question should not be what can we do to revive it, but how can we create something else. In Iceland there is a high divorce rate, I believe the highest in Europe in fact. Now, I am reluctant to compare an island with a population of something like 400,000 with, say, a continent size of population. However, they have a certain culture which is interesting in my opinion. First, they get divorced easily and with minimal conflict. It doesn't take much for a divorce. Secondly, there is 50-50 custody. And being a small island, parental alienation is less common. The next setup must be in my opinion, is to eliminate romantic love altogether as a precondition of a family. It must be no more than, say, a business contract. For instance, instead of looking for an attractive partner of the opposite sex, the relationship must be nothing more than a friendship with similar ideals, for instance, on discipline or religion. Heterosexual males should, or could even replace male/female relationships for childbearing. We know, for instance, that gay couples have less tendency to break up than heterosexual lesbian relations. And with the removal of love as a condition to bind two males together, it could be a very practical contract. Alternatively, there could be a constituted single father-mother relationship whereby a father gains a child through, say, artificial uterus or from surrogacy and then has a relationship with a woman. The advantage to this would be that in the case of divorce/breakup, each partner leaves with their biological offspring.